Welcome to Money Matters. I'm Tom Spottiswoode of River Bay Investment Group, Wells Fargo Advisors Financial Network in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And today we have on our show Regina DeMeo. She's an attorney, and we're going to talk about love and money and collaborative divorce. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
This is the second time I've had you in
about
as many years. Is that right?
Exactly.
How have things been working out for you? I understand you're doing something with Sirius.
I get to go on every week and comment about celebrity divorces and marriages. So
like, what have you been talking about lately? What's been a big celebrity divorce? I don't read the magazines.
Oh well, yeah. I now have an excuse for keeping up with this.
Yeah.
This weekend Drew Barrymore got married for the third time.
Okay.
So that was fun to talk about that. And last week Mark Zuckerberg got married. So I got to talk about his marriage.
Well, let's talk about that, Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, they just came out with the Facebook IPO. Was it a very lavish, extravagant affair, or what was it like?
No, actually, it was very understated. He had about 100 guests. Everybody thought they were going to Priscilla's graduation party, so they didn't even know they were going to a wedding. Her dress was less than $5,000. The desserts were about less than $4 a piece. It was very well done, I thought.
Okay, so how does that compare to most of the weddings you see? I mean, to me, as an advisor, financial advisor, I'm kind of surprised. I'm kind of shocked at how much upfront money is spent on these weddings. I mean, my wedding was less than Mark Zuckerberg's. So my second one was less than Mark Zuckerberg's. So I'm like, why? I mean, why? How did people justify putting so much money into that when there's a 50% divorce rate? I mean, can you talk to that or?
Yeah, I find it very, disconcerting to realize that most people are spending $27,000 on a wedding. That's the average here in Maryland.
Okay.
When most people, I think the average household income is about $67,000 in Maryland. That's a lot of money to be putting on a wedding that may or may not, succeed.
Yeah, how do they justify that? I mean, then you hear about these people that get divorced a few years later and they're still paying the fees on their. Is that true? They're still paying for the
wedding. Yeah.
I mean, do you see that a lot, or?
No, not so much, but people do argue about things like the, engagement ring and, wedding gifts, and it's just, at that point, I mean, my God, just cut your losses. Talking about Zuckerberg, were we able to see a copy of the prenup, or was there a prenup, or how does it work? I guess at that level, people do have a prenuptial contract. I would love to see the prenup. I'm sure there is one. And, what's funny is that I think the people that need the prenups the most are actually regular people, not so much these millionaires that can fight it out. It's the regular, normal people like you and me that would probably need to have a prenup to protect our assets.
Well, what is in a prenup normally, prenuptial contract? Why don't you explain it and how it works, and what do you see in a contract like that?
Sure. I mean,
an agreement, I guess you should say.
There's really three main components. We define what's separate property. We're going to define what the couple thinks should be joint property. And then usually with alimony, we either do a complete waiver or we set caps. So a cap on the duration and a cap on the amount. Okay,
what's going on with, what do you see with alimony? I mean, you see a lot of double income spouses now. Are people still paying alimony? That doesn't come up that often anymore, does it?
It's a great question. There's a whole movement, there's alimony reform going on in the United States. It's about 25% of all divorces that still have some alimony component in them.
And what are the rates, or how does it work out, or what are the numbers?
Well, that's the problem, and that's why there's alimony reform, because there is no formula normal. Like in Maryland, we don't have a formula. You can't just plug in the people's incomes and their age and the length of the marriage and have a number that comes out, and we can all rely on that number. It's up to a judge to decide what he thinks is fair and reasonable.
Well, what have you seen? What have you seen? Like, tell us a couple of examples of what you've seen where people set up their prenuptials and how they set up the alimony.
Oh, well, that's easy. I mean, most people these days just want a complete waiver. So basically, things don't work out between you and me, like, have a nice day, right? That's it. That's the cleanest way to deal with alimony. And if we can't get a complete waiver, so sometimes I try to suggest that we do like a 5-year minimum, like the marriage has to last at least 5 years.
Okay, that's interesting. All right.
Right? And if it lasts longer than 5 years, then we would look at the situation at that time. And we still want to set some sort of cap, so you'd want to know that you're never going to pay more than, for example, $5,000 a month for 5 years.
Okay, so talk about separate property. How do you define what separate property is? Is like what you bring to the marriage or what I bring to the marriage, and it's never going to combine? Is that something that you have to define?
It's that and more than that. I mean, you can define separate property however you want to. So I could say, you know what, my 401k is completely off the table. And that would not be the normal way the law would deal with it if we didn't have a prenup. But when you have a prenup, you get to define what you want to keep as separate. And what I find is that most people nowadays, they only want title to control. So only, for example, if you and I buy a car together, will that be considered joint property? So if you buy a car and you just put it in your name, it's just your property.
I see, I'm thinking as we're talking, I'm thinking about the young couple just getting started.
Right.
But you're not talking about that really. You're talking about like a second marriage or where they've built up a 401k or they built up assets. Is that right or no?
I think it used to be that way, but I think people are waiting longer to get married to begin with.
Yes.
Right? So now, you're looking at a 30-year-old that actually has a 401k and actually may have, inherited some money and purchased a condo. So I'm seeing first-time marriages that do have prenups in place because they already are marrying with assets.
Okay, and they're older. They're like in late 20s or early 30s.
Right.
No, I guess that's what you're saying.
Right.
And do you see people like not doing this, or what's the number of people actually do the prenups? What's the percentage? Is it 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20?
I don't know. I'm in my busy season right now, so I'm doing a lot of prenups these days. But I mean, it's hard to really gauge. I mean, there's 1 million marriages. No, I'm sorry. There's about 2 million people getting married each year. So I mean, it's hard to track, but we know that there's 1 million divorces each year, which is how we come up with the 50%.
Well, okay, and talk a little bit. I know you started about the alimony reform movement that's happening in the United States. How's that working?
Well, these are people that want some sort of formula in place so that there would just be, like in Virginia, they have alimony calculations. You can actually plug in the numbers of the parties' incomes, the length of the marriage, and it would tell you what the recommended amount should be. We don't have that in D.C. We don't have that in Maryland. So it would be nice to know, this is a 14-year marriage. This is how much the parties earn. This is what the number should be.
Now, who's driving that? Is it lawyers or?
No, I think it's people that got screwed over.
Oh, okay. So they're saying, look, we didn't get any money. This is unfair. We got to have some type of because it could be very arbitrary.
It's very arbitrary, right?
What have you seen? What's been like very? What have you seen? What are the ranges? I'm just what kind of stories do you have there?
I mean, I have one client who's receiving $10,000 a month indefinitely, which means it goes on forever until she either dies or remarries.
Is that? I mean, but I don't know how much the husband was making. I mean, is it a function of lifestyle? Is it a function of income? Or again, it just depends.
No, it's all of it. You're right. I mean, it's about the lifestyle they had while they were married. Also, like the reasons that they're getting divorced. It has to do with someone's ability to pay and the other person's reasonable needs. So there's a lot of things that go into the equation. But yeah, it's very discretionary and it can be problematic. I mean, there's people that are paying alimony, for the next 20 years.
I guess you say when you talk to people, you say everybody should do this. What kind of pushback do you get on not doing prenups? What do people say? They're like, oh, we don't want to do that. We're in love. We're going to be in love forever. It's not going to happen to us. I mean, what do you hear?
I actually have some colleagues that are pushing back, saying, no, I know that you think this makes sense, but I really have this fantasy of just having the romantic life that goes on forever, and I don't want to bring this up. I think it's the fear of bringing it up that keeps people from doing it. But I've also had a lot of people tell me that the only reason they're willing to go down that aisle is because of a prenup, because the prenup takes the fear out of the equation. So it sounds to me it's as if you've had experience. It's like long-term care. The people who want to buy long-term care insurance are the people who their parents didn't have it, and they saw how much it cost and it just ruined their life savings. So it's a function of experience, I would imagine, right? I think you're right, and also parents can be a great driving force in that. So, if somebody has like a trust fund that the parents want to protect, their parents will weigh in heavily on getting a prenup done. Yeah, it's always the in-laws, right? Right. All right, why don't you hold right there? We'll be right back after this break. Please stay tuned.
That's it.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. When you adopt a child from foster care, just being there makes all the difference.
Welcome back to Money Matters and our discussion with Regina DeMeo about love and money. So, Regina, we've been talking a lot about collaborative divorce and assets and money and 401k plans. What about kids? I mean, where do kids factor in all this? I mean, how are they? Do you see? Would you see that it's more important to have that set up before the marriage, especially if you have kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that people should definitely talk about how they're planning to handle kids, but you can't put it in a prenup. So, for example,
why?
Well, people can change their minds. Like maybe prior to my having a child, I might have thought, well, I'm not going to fight about custody because my career is so important. You know, I won't fight about custody. But then you actually become a mom and you get attached to the child, and all of a sudden your feelings change. So we're not allowed to put any provisions about custody or child support ahead of time. So those can only be addressed in the event of a divorce or separation.
What do you see? What happens when the prenup? Okay. So now we have a prenup, and everyone's happy they got a prenup, and everyone's like, okay, now we're gonna get married. 5 years later, things don't work out. How solid are those prenups? How strong are they? How rigorous? Or obviously they're lawyers, so it can get attacked, right? I mean, do people follow that plan, or does things change dramatically? What do you see?
This is why I recommend that people they have to try and do it as soon as possible, like prior to the marriage. You don't want to wait until the day before the wedding to sign a prenup. You have to have full disclosure, and it's best if both parties have attorneys. So as long as you meet those 3 criteria, then your prenup should be pretty
solid, ironclad.
Exactly.
But what have you seen? What have you seen 5 years later? I mean, when the grenades start getting thrown around.
Yeah, of course. There's always somebody that's going to try and say, oh, well, I didn't understand what I was signing. I want to invalidate this. But they usually have an uphill battle, and we usually put provisions in there that say that if someone's going to contest the validity, that person has to pay all attorney's fees. I mean, we're going to make it as hard as possible to try and invalidate that prenup. And in the event somebody has an issue with whatever the prenup provisions are, we always put a clause that says they'll go to mediation first or try a collaborative divorce prior to going to court.
Let's do that. Okay, so you're saying that going to court is worst case scenario. There are steps before that can be mediated.
Right.
Why don't you talk about that?
So in mediation, you have one person who's a neutral person. Like if I'm the mediator, I'm not taking sides. I'm just helping people figure out how they're going to resolve whatever issue they have about what to do with the house, what to do with their retirement accounts, that kind of stuff. But I'm not taking a side. If people
have you been a mediator?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love being a mediator.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Why?
Why do I like being a mediator? Yeah. Well, because people can own the outcome as opposed to having some arbitrary judge decide, and these are judges that don't know the family at all, and then they have to make these decisions based on who happens to get the best expert that day, who has the best witness that shows up that day. Some people are very articulate in my office, and then they fall apart in a courtroom. So I have seen some pretty horrible decisions made, and it's not because that person deserved to lose. It's just, random things that happened that caused a traumatic event in the courtroom and led to a terrible outcome.
Okay, so you're saying once they do the mediation, it's a much better situation because then they're working together. It's a more collaborative process. It's a negotiation instead of a fight.
Exactly. I mean, they're in that room with the goal to settle their case, and they're looking at the best solutions possible for that family, and they're not posturing. There's no highballing and lowballing going on. So I definitely like being a mediator much better than a litigator. Did
you see that article, I don't know if in the Wall Street Journal, they had that a couple of weeks ago about the divorce hotels?
Yes, I did. I actually got to comment on it.
And what did you think about that?
I think it's a great concept. I mean, it's a little cheesy, right? But
right. How does it work? Go ahead.
Yeah, there's this guy in the Netherlands who created this hotel, and basically a couple goes in for the weekend, and they come out with a mediated agreement, and it's really quite a genius concept, right? I mean,
well, there's a demand, or there's source of funds for that. Yeah, I would imagine it's okay.
Well, But it can't get any cheaper than that. I mean, people don't understand how much it costs to go to court. If you go to court, it's going to cost you at least $20,000 a person. So each side usually winds up paying at least $20,000. Those are just national statistics. Right? You go to a mediator for a weekend and get your thing done. It's private, it's confidential, and you're not taking time off of work. A lot of people have to take time off of work for a trial, and it causes so much stress that some people wind up losing their job because they're not focusing at work. So I actually do like the hotel concept only in the sense that this is something that people can address on the weekend when they're able to focus and not also have to worry about work, and they're focused on getting it done because they want to walk out of that hotel with their separation agreement in place.
And they do have a mediator, isn't that right?
Yes.
Okay, so it would be something like you, and then they go in. I mean, it makes a lot of sense for the reasons you described.
It does make a lot of sense, right?
And the staff is there, and they're helping you, and they're aware of the situation. I think it's great.
It is a great idea.
So what? Okay, so mediation works, and then what is the collaborative divorce? How is that different?
Okay, so it's like mediation on steroids. Basically, if somebody doesn't feel like they can go into mediation and represent themselves, because as a mediator, I'm a neutral. So in a collaborative divorce, you each have an attorney, and the two attorneys work together to help the parties reach an agreement. But it's like you have your own ally with you in that mediation setting. So we're still all focused on settling, but you're not in there advocating by yourself.
All right, let's talk about mediation. For you, you're a big proponent of it. How do you ever see it blows up, or it breaks down, or it doesn't work out? Does that happen? People go in with unrealistic expectations of what the outcome is going to be?
Exactly. I mean, mediation and collaborative divorce, they're entirely voluntary processes, right? And so someone could decide that this process isn't working for them, it's not going the way that they planned, and they can bail at any time. It's rare. It is truly rare that it happens because I try to screen cases ahead of time.
Oh, but how do you screen for? You screen for emotion, or you screen for when you screen? How do you screen?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you want to make sure that there isn't domestic violence. You
Okay.
want to ask people whether there has been a history of violence in the past, and those cases would not be appropriate for collaborative or mediation. You want to make sure that that person has at least consulted an attorney once to make sure that they understand their rights and obligations. You want to make sure that when they walk in there, they're comfortable knowing what needs to be addressed, and they're not an emotional basket case. Because people, when they're emotional, do not make the best legal decisions.
Yeah, but I would imagine that most people who are in this situation are emotional basket cases. No, I mean, I remember my first divorce. I was a wreck for a year, and then it was tough. I mean, it was tricky. We didn't have any kids. It was a little bit easier, but it was tricky.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, which is why in the collaborative divorce, people can also have a divorce coach by their side, and the divorce coach would help them rein in their emotions, basically.
And okay, so what do you do as next? So the mediation works, and it's great, and then collaborative divorce works, and it's great, and then neither works, and they go to court. I mean, how's that process work? And normally, if they go to court at this point, they don't have any. They don't have any documents. They don't have a prenup. Things are messy.
Right. So, I mean, the worst case scenario is somebody does wind up in court, and then sometimes you have to do that because they can't get the other person to respond. There's usually, one person that's driving the divorce, and the other person is sort of caught by surprise. That's a common dynamic. So if the other person who doesn't want to deal with the issue won't respond, won't go to mediation, won't do anything, sometimes you have to go to court. But the courts will still, ask the people whether they're willing to go to mediation. There's all sorts of services available at the courthouse. There's facilitators that try and help people facilitate an agreement. So we're really...
So the system is set up so that, hey, we don't want to go to trial. This is the worst case scenario.
Exactly.
They try to push you out as much as possible. They're like, okay, well, we got to go to trial. Then it's where the drama happens.
Exactly. I mean, there are judges that will do a settlement conference and try and force people to settle just because they know that the outcome in a trial is going to be horrible. And thankfully, only 5% of all cases wind up going to court.
Okay, very good. If you can hold right there.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after this public service announcement. Please stay tuned.
Cotton balls, duct tape, spoon,
Needle,
Scalpel.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Welcome back to Money Matters and our discussion with Regina DeMeo about love and money. So, Regina, our conversation has been pretty dispassionate. I mean, we're talking about prenups and collaborative divorce and mediation, and it's kind of cut and dry from a professional's perspective. But I know you're not a therapist, but what do you see as successful marriages and unsuccessful marriages? What's the difference? I mean, why are people in this situation? Obviously, if they have a prenup and the option that they're going to get divorced, I mean, that it's going to kind of soothe that exit. But how do you avoid that?
Well, one of my favorite books.
I know you're not a therapist. I'm
no,
sorry.
No, that's great. I
but
love
you
this
see this
question.
all the time. You see this all the time.
I do. So there's a book by Dennis Gottman. It's called 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. And the main point is really conflict resolution, right? So I think the problem is some people don't know how to fight nicely. We can all fight in a nasty way, but very few can actually fight nicely. And if you can't resolve conflict, your marriage is going to fall apart. And so many people have unrealistic expectations in their partners. It's just
For example?
unreal. Well, like a woman who wants her husband to bring home a $300,000 salary, but also wants him home by 6 o'clock each night, to be home for dinner or help with the kids. Okay, that's not going to happen.
Right.
It's just not realistic, right? I mean, the person who's bringing home that kind of salary is going to have to work crazy hours. They don't just give away $300,000 salaries.
Right, or the husband expects the wife to be all, spend working and then taking care of the kids, and then she's supposed to be all, have dinner ready and look great and take it. It works both ways, I would imagine.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so no, I had to ask because we're talking about the one thing, but there's obviously some things that work. Some of these marriages work. So and you don't see them arguing about money too much. Is that the case? Or?
No, I do, but I just don't think that that's really the issue. Like, the issue is not the issue. The point is, if people had better skills in terms of communicating and being able to say, hey, you know what, Tom, like this month I didn't bring home a really great draw, so we're going to have to cut back, right? Some people have issues about talking about money with their spouse, and they hide information. The other things, it's true. Or what people do, and I hate this, they want to avoid conflict, so they just, they say, oh, I need to do some work, and then they go on the internet and they start going on Facebook, right? I got to comment on this the other day for ABC. So they go on Facebook, and they, you go in there, and it's pretty innocent in the beginning. You're just connecting with your old high school sweetheart. It's like, oh, what are you doing these days? But next thing you know, you develop this emotional connection with this person, and you're spending less and less time with your own spouse and family, and you're not sharing information with these people. And, one thing leads to another, and then you wind up having an affair. I mean, that's just, I see that like every month now. Every single month, somebody has a Facebook story for me.
It's the internet. It's the internet. Now, I got to ask you. I mean, we're in the Great Recession or the global economic downturn, whatever you want to call it. Have you seen divorces go up or down, or what's been the economic impact on the divorce rate?
So there was a really bad year for us.
People don't want to pay lawyers.
Exactly. No, there was actually a drop, about 15%, that lawyers saw in divorces. I think that was back in 2010. But people can only hold out for so long.
Right.
And so, now the phones are ringing again, and, people are doing it much more economically. I don't see a lot of people willing to spend a lot of money with lawyer fees, right? That's definitely, I think, something we're going to be seeing a lot of. More and more people are willing to mediate, do collaborative divorces, or try and work things out, negotiating, but without going to court, because they realize they can't afford a full-blown divorce.
So I guess that's good and bad for you. It's bad in that you don't get the big ticket, but it's actually good because, I mean, you're actually helping people resolve their conflicts in a much more balanced fashion.
Exactly. I mean, I'd rather do, people like 10 hours of work and get them onto a better place, and then they can move on and just get the next case going.
Then go to war.
Yeah. I mean, it's better for me, and it's better for society.
All right, well, speaking about that, let's talk about the kids. I mean, how does that work with taking care of the kids afterwards? I mean, how does that, what are the different facets of that?
Yeah, well, so people do fight a lot about kids, and I try and help people understand that, kids don't look at calendars. Kids don't actually count the number of days that they're with mommy versus the days that they're with daddy. lawyers do. We're the sick ones that actually look at a calendar and try and calculate. You want to get to 128 overnights in Maryland so that you can be considered a shared custodian.
120.
128.
128, okay.
Right. So if you have your child 35% of the time, then you are a shared custodian for physical custody. And then there's legal custody, which is making major decisions together. 99% of all people can share legal custody.
Okay, they can share legal custody, but not the physical custody?
Well, people fight about overnights more than I really have time to talk about. But yeah, people will go to war over 2 extra overnights.
And how do you handle that normally, or how do you work that out?
Well, I like phasing in schedules. So sometimes
Is this? I'm sorry. When you say when they're fighting, you're talking about the mediation part of it. Not,
yeah.
you're working out. Well, I want to have them this days, and we're going on vacation, and this is what you see.
Yeah. I mean, I think the real problem is this, right? So roles are changing when you get divorced. You have certain roles that you might play when you're married and you're together. One person says, I'm going to be the primary breadwinner. The other person takes sacrifice in their career to stay home with the kids. But when you're divorcing, it's all up for grabs, and roles can change. And so some people get stuck on the past, and they get stuck on the fact that somebody wasn't around for the last 5 years to change diapers and to feed the child, and so why should they now get 50% of the time, right? But if people could think more from the child's perspective and how great it would be for that child to have a good relationship with both parents. Of course. Right? It would make my life a lot easier.
Okay, but sometimes they end up being a pawn in the game or in the discussions. They're
Exactly.
a bargaining chip.
Exactly.
That's terrible. Do you see, and we got to close up here, but are more people, another thing I had read was that people are living longer, much longer, so that these marriages are longer, and people are getting divorced later, like they wait till after the kids leave. Are you seeing that too, or?
Yes, there's a surge in later life divorces.
Well, and can you talk to that real quick, or?
Yeah, there's actually a study done that said that it had to do with these baby boomers who were realizing that they would rather be alone than be in an unhappy marriage. So they'll suck it up while the kids are still in the house, and then the second that kid graduates, people are filing for divorce, which is very, very sad.
That's sad in a way, but on the other hand, they came to a realization they want to have something different. It's good they're making the decision.
Right.
Thanks. If anybody wanted to find out more about this, or they wanted to contact you, where would they go?
So I have my website, reginademeo.com. My office is in DuPont Circle, and I also have a blog, Gen X Smarty.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to have you on the show, and I definitely want you to come back. And thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate the questions and comments we've been getting. If you want to contact us, you can find us on the website. We look forward to seeing you next week. And remember, your money matters.